The baseline reality of trauma is that it begins as something completely outside of our control. A death in the family, an abrupt relocation, an unexpected medical diagnosis. These are catastrophic losses that happen to a person. Look at how one 16-year-old responded to a fierce argument with his father. He took physical, vintage photographs and deliberately whited himself out. At this point, the trauma migrates. It stops being an external event that occurred in the past and becomes an active, self-inflicted defense mechanism in the present. This literal act of self-removal is the founding of a mental prison. Chronic isolation rarely happens by accident. It is meticulously constructed by the individual to protect a crushed heart from further damage. This notebook page shows a routine life audit, mapping out a person's best and worst times. Notice how the deepest relational wounds, deaths, illnesses, self-erasure, are carefully recorded here as foundational data points. We can see the walls of this psychological prison in these notes. People make silent vows after being hurt, promising to never trust again. The trap is that pain yields sympathy. This negative attention eventually calcifies the trauma into a permanent pain identity crutch. When someone is trapped in this state, telling them to let it go is actively harmful. Instructing a person to abandon their primary coping mechanism without giving them a replacement tool guarantees they will feel entirely broken when they fail. Escaping this cycle requires a specific behavioral equation. You have to subtract the old identity and then rigorously add a new one. The first variable in this equation is identity by subtraction. Before anything new can be built, the psychological site has to be cleared of toxic attachments. Look closely at this written reminder. You are not your pain. Pain exists, pain is felt. Acknowledging pain occurs to the self is the cognitive separation. To achieve this, expose hidden shame. As this note points out, bringing dark secrets into the light strips their power. There is a strict caveat here. You must choose safe, trustworthy people for this exposure. Revealing your deepest torment to the wrong crowd quickly turns your trauma into casual gossip. Once the pain identity is subtracted, a vacuum is left behind. Clearing the site is only half the battle. A new structure must be poured. The second variable is identity by addition. You rebuild the self through deliberate, selfless action directed toward society. This class note captures the core principle beautifully. True stability is a byproduct found by giving to others. In this program, Step 6 requires strict documentation. Participants log 10 hours of helping strangers, with zero expectation of getting anything back. To figure out what kind of person you want to become during this process, you use a diagnostic tool called Trading Places. You list someone you admire, and then write down 4 traits you respect about them. Here is how this flowchart works in practice. The traits you admire in others, things like dignity, leadership, or kindness, are exactly the ones you personally struggle with the most. Identifying them creates your development blueprint. The vacuum left by trauma is permanently filled by the audible service of others. By consistently executing these actions, the survivor becomes a positive force in their community. Maintaining this rebuilt self requires daily vigilance. There are subtle, everyday behaviors that can easily pull a person back into isolation. This hand-drawn diagram illustrates the starting point of relapse. Look at the armored figure labeled isolate. This is what it looks like to psychologically suit up and block out the world. One modern form of this armor is stacking. This happens when you are physically present with someone but offer only a sliver of attention because you're scrolling on a device. Another trap is library dominance. This is the intellectual habit of listening to another person's raw feelings and treating them as material to be analyzed rather than an emotion to be shared. These behaviors represent the physical reconstruction of the mental prison, the actual architecture that keeps us trapped inside our own heads. To dismantle those walls, you can apply strict reality checks. First is the kitchen thermometer test. Instead of guessing how well you listened, you ask the other person directly, "Did you feel like I was actually here with you?" Next is the Alzheimer's test. You judge the value of a shared moment by asking yourself one brutal question. Would the time spent still be worth it if the other person immediately forgot every word we said? Applying these tests reconfigures how we interact with the world. You move from being a passive victim of your history to a highly active participant in your present. Even as artificial intelligence threatens to automate away careers and skills, the core encouragement remains intact. You are not artificial. Every individual is an irreplaceable original. Escaping a mental prison isn't about forgetting what you lost. It is about deciding to define your identity by what you choose to give.